Hello and welcome to the CNBC Africa special as we focus primarily on agriculture for this particular one. Not just any talk about agriculture, but how we can hasten this process of not just mechanization, but a green revolution like Asia had, or even Latin America. And joining me to break down this particular one is to my immediate left, Mamadou Biteye, who is with the Rockefeller Foundation. Good to have you, Mamadou. Right next to him, we do have Karine Gatnegdo, who is the Vice President Strategy and Partnerships. Good to have you, Karine. Right next to her, we do have Svein Tor, who is the President and CEO of Yara. And to my extreme left is Vanessa Adams, who is the Vice President and Country Support, not forgetting delivery, at Alliance for Green Revolution for Africa, AGRF. Let me start with you, Vanessa. Well, yes, Mamadou is giving you the look already. Let me start with you, Vanessa. You're the host here for this particular AGRF. Just give us a sense of, first of all, the theme. Where did the theme come from?
Well, thanks for having us. We really appreciate your hosting us as well as us hosting you. So thank you mutually. Lead, Measure, Grow is an evolution of thinking. The AGRF actually has evolved into a real partnership, and Mamadou has taken a lot of leadership from the Rockefeller side as well as other partners, Yara and many others, for a number of years. And people are eager to see progress, and progress has to be measurable. You know, we always say if a tree falls in a forest and no one's there, you don't know that it happened, it never happened. And it's a bit that way with agricultural growth. There may be improvements somewhere, and if it's not captured, if it's not a part of an integrated strategy, so it may lack leadership, it may lack measurement, then it didn't grow, even if it did. So we're really looking at AGRA to convene and raise the level of visibility and leadership towards the commitments that everyone has made, and then measure on those.
Mamadou, when we spoke earlier, the word that kept on coming out over and over again was quantification in a way, and also, of course, leadership. Why is this why is it time now to actually bring this to the fore, as opposed to all the other AGRFs that we've had over the years? Why now?
Well, you know, as Vanessa said, this has been a long process of building partnerships and getting partnerships to align, to collaborate, to align. And over the time also, partners have made many commitments. A good example is the 10th anniversary, 2016, in Kenya.
Nairobi.
There was close to $30 billion of commitment to agriculture transformation. The following year, 2017, in Abidjan, there was about 6 billion new commitments, additional commitments. It is very important for us to put in place mechanisms that actually allow us to measure that. Are those commitments coming through to the sector? But not just if the resources and the commitment are coming through, but are they having the intended effect? That's very important, something we should be able to track. The second thing is also the commitment of heads of states via the Malabo Declaration to ending food insecurity and poverty by 2025. And this comes also from the commitment that was made in 2003 in Maputo. So they, in that declaration, in the number 7 objectives, committed that they will hold each other accountable to the first objective they have set. So it was important to put in place also a mechanism, and in the form of the scorecard and the biannual review, actually to measure that progress. So we think that, and we agree that it is very important, that it's always important when you set a goal to really have a way to monitor your progress towards that goal.
Fascinating indeed. Let me talk to, well, in the middle, we have maybe a new potential partner. Karine, you can represent that. And Yara, of course, Svein, you've been part of this conversation and partnering with AGRA for, well, many years, if I could say the least. I just want to pick your brain, the two of you, regarding AGRF's partners, I mean, away from AGRA, but AGRF, as it has come to be known, maybe the past 10 years. What is this? What do you bring to the table, if I could just put it actually very plainly? Let me start with you, Svein.
Well, there's absolutely a need for a green revolution in Africa. And you mentioned initially about the green revolution in Asia, and you can't just copy and paste that here. Every region is different. You have to find different solutions here in Africa compared to Asia, for instance. I think for our business model, we need to adapt it to the needs of Africa. Our main business is crop nutrition, focusing on the farmer. But we have to realize that there's only so much that we can do working with the farmer. We need to think much more holistically here in Africa, create full value chains, working with governments, working with the NGOs, working with partners along the whole value chain. And for that reason, AGRF is a really good platform for meeting everyone at one place to make commitments and also to measure the progress that we've made throughout the years.
Karine, I just want you to maybe touch base on this one.
Sure. So first of all, what we can bring to the table as Israel and as Startup Nation Central is first best practices. Israel innovation started out of necessity. And now we came actually to a country with no food, no water, and we were quite isolated, so we needed to innovate. So if there is one thing that needed to be learned from our history is that you need to connect innovation with real problems and challenges. Second is mindset. Israel has high tolerance for failure. So in order to really innovate, you need to try different technologies. You need to try and fail to see what works and what doesn't.
That sounds like Edison coming up with, well, trying out the bulb so many times and actually failing so many times.
Yeah, actually this is why you see so many serial entrepreneurs in Israel, because they fail, but they keep on going until they find the right solution. Another thing is to build collaboration, to bring many stakeholders around the table. In Israel, our ecosystem is based on a collaboration. This is the way to build a healthy ecosystem. And of course, technologies. Israel has over 650 startups and tech companies that focus on agriculture and food technologies that touching the entire value chain, from smart irrigation, for smart farming, throughout post-harvest, and there are many solutions. Some of them are actually here with us in this conference. We have 9 startups and 1 research institute that are present here, and they seek collaboration. So the situation in Israel is quite different right now. Most of the technologies that is developed in Israel is actually aiming global needs and challenges.
Mamadou and Vanessa, many a times we do hear policies and commitments being put up by the African Union, and fast forward a few years, these are just collecting dust on a cupboard somewhere. You did allude to the Malabo Declaration, but up to now, not so many countries across Africa are committing that 10%, when it comes to the fiscal end, committing it to agriculture as a whole. We're still lagging below that 5% when it comes to budgets. How frustrating is it for you guys to see, at least on the national end, governments coming up short, yet when they come here, they are singing this, they're really singing the tune. Vanessa, you're laughing at this one.
I'm not laughing. I'm enjoying the question because the frustration is also the passion, right? So let me come first to the point that, one, here today at AGRF, there are 10 ministers from African countries, and they made the time and commitment to come and have the conversation and be publicly on the spot, under the spotlight, to be accountable. And they knew the topic was Lead, Measure, Grow. So I don't think today anybody is questioning the commitments. And I think, we can be realistic. The complexities of the economies in Africa are extremely diverse. So targeting a 10% and then all of a sudden there's some instability and the defense budget goes up and so on and so forth. Even the commitments which were made about donor contributions to Africa haven't necessarily been met in terms of the percentages that various countries have made. So it's not I don't think about keeping the measurement of the percentage, but the willingness to have the conversation, engage, build coalitions, and innovate. I agree. We have the Israeli delegation. We have India who came this time. We have China who has a delegation here. And so we want to build on successes. You talked about other green revolutions. Look at what Brazil and Vietnam have done. But we know it's different in Africa. Why can't we leapfrog? How are we going to use technology differently? How can small commercial farmers actually use their phones to connect immediately to the consumers? So I don't think anybody's hiding or shying away anymore from commitments.
We've just come immediately before this panel. We are coming from the Leadership for Agriculture Network, where ministers of agriculture today shared their experiences and also their frustrations, also around that particular point, around followership on those commitments. But frankly, I think that it was a very interesting discussion because government has scarce resources. They have to prioritize. There are many competing priorities. It's agriculture, it's health, it's education, just as they said. But I think that what we really learned from there is the example and the need for ministers of agriculture to make the business case for the Minister of Finance to understand that what would be the return on investment from agriculture. And I think that, and they acknowledge it, that for a long time, the conversation between the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Finance has been more about the need to support what is the social sector. Minister of Finance can say, and I can talk about my own country, where ever since I am conscious, I know that every year when the production campaign starts, the big discussion is about fertilizer, is about seeds, it's about the level of subsidy by the government. I'm over 50 years old now. So even if you are subsidizing every day, that should be able to reduce over time because you're having a return on that, so that those resources can be reallocated to other priority sectors. So I think that, first of all, I think the change of mindset from the ministers of agriculture in how they see agriculture, how they pitch agriculture, and that they really build the real business case would be really important, not only in bringing countries or governments to meet that commitment, but also to bringing in more private investment into the sector as a business.
I need to hear from the two in between here, because you do raise a point on making that business case, and who better to actually engage in this one than the two sitting in the middle, Sve and Karine. Maybe you want to jump in now.
I could start, and I think you're absolutely right. We need to start talking about agriculture as a business, and I believe that there's a tremendous business opportunity here. Just look at the big picture. The population in the world is growing. There's a need for more food, and Africa is particularly well suited to be a supplier of food to the rest of the world. But the fact today is that Africa imports food for about $35 billion per year. That's $35 billion that's leaving Africa and going elsewhere, money that could be spent creating employment, ensuring food security in Africa. So there's a business case just in that. And we need them to focus on helping the farmers to become more productive and creating that business. And through that, we can help solve some of these challenges. And let me also say that unless we increase yield in African agriculture by year 2025, which is not far away from now, the import bill will be $100 billion. But let's turn it around and view this as a business instead. and increase the yields, make it a business, make it as exports to create income for Africa. It's possible, and I think we always have to keep that in mind as that we think business, that it shouldn't be relying on donations and subsidies over the long term. That's needed to get it going, but in the long term, this should be a business that is self-sustaining.
Karin, making a case for the business case.
Yeah, so actually all of us are talking a lot about challenges, but we see a lot of opportunities over here.
Well, they're saying $1 trillion by 2030, if I'm right, for the stats. That's how the projections are looking. This is a big case.
Big case, and actually technology is not enough. We need to think about innovative business models that actually can connect these technologies to smallholder farmers, to understand their needs, their challenges, and also to create strong strategic partnerships. This is exactly why Startup Nation Central, my organization, is partnered with AGRA. And what AGRA is bringing to the table is the real understanding and deep knowledge of these needs and challenges. And this is the only way that we can work together. And I think that, again, to put a lot of stakeholders around the table, eventually the ROI will come.
I would say the elephant in the room is us maybe sticking to our old. By us, I mean myself. I dig every once in a while. Is it possible for us to have our own revolution without changing from our traditional ways of farming? By that, I mean no irrigation, no fertilizer. And if that's the case, how do we change the mindset of that farmer down there, that farmer who earns, well, who's on less than an acre? Vanessa, maybe you could take this one first.
At the risk of being a bit offensive, I don't think traditional farming is intentional. I think it's some other enabling environment or supporting environment factors which are contributing to this. The elephant in the room for me is land ownership, water utilization, the things which are shared resources, which have to be managed with the support, and very difficult decisions have to be made and taken for governments. If farmers can use their land as collateral and they have title to it, they can get finance, they can buy more inputs, they can actually utilize and build on it, they can do so many different things. But right now, that's not the case in so many countries. So one is, let's address the tough issues which underlie the traditional way of farming. I spent a good amount of time in rural Mali with cotton farmers and women who were actually taking, $50, $100 loans in order to buy very, very small things like, to help them with mini businesses. These aren't even MSMEs. These are micro businesses. But that $25, $50, $100, it actually didn't help them the way we hoped microfinance would. Those same women didn't have decision-making authority in their families, and so if they actually made money, they had to turn it over to their husbands. So there are other cultural underpinnings, there are legal underpinnings, there are other factors than just farming. So yes, we have to transform farming, but we can't ignore the environment that it's happening in either.
There's really very many layers here. Sven, I could see you nodding there. Maybe you want to take over.
Well, to be very straight on your question, it's not possible to solve this without changing farming techniques. But what we have to focus on is bringing that knowledge out to the farmers. And as individual companies, there's only so much that we can do. And here's about collaboration together to reach the farmers. And indeed, we do have a cooperation with AGRA together with the World Food Programme, with Syngenta, Bayer, Rabobank, and others, called the Farm to Market Alliance, which is a program to reach out to smallholder farmers, to help them with farming techniques, with input, and creating a marketplace. And with that program, we've already reached 136,000 farmers, increased yields by 32%, farmer income by 83%. So it's a first step, but it shows what is possible when you think differently and work differently, but also bring the knowledge to the farmers and they adopt it.
Whenever you hear transformation, at least for the agriculture space, usually what follows is access to credit, access to finance. Is it possible to have a talk about innovation without maybe hastening access to finance? You've touched on the land issue. Safaricom in Kenya came up with a fascinating move where women would wake up. It's always the women because they're way better at saving and actually entrepreneurial skill. They would wake up, borrow from Safaricom, very little money, like $3, $4, go to the shop, to the market, buy greens, then take them to the market, sell them rather for a huge profit, pay back the loan that they took at 4 in the morning, and have enough money to, and this just would go on for weeks and weeks and weeks and months. Credit is basically everything. Mamadou, I just want to pick your brain here. Access to credit, vis-a-vis moving forward and hastening this process, how essential is this?
Let me first come back to, and I think that the example you gave is really part of that change of mindset that is required. And I think that to this there are many things. I think that the example you give is very helpful. It probably saves those women from the money lenders, you know, who give very high rates and all of that. But again, we need to look long term, you know. That subsistence day to day without long term perspective on the farmer and all the other value chain actors need actually to change. Because that also always, in my view, perpetuates the subsistence sort of idea. I think that we need to go to a point where a farmer is not just producing because it's to eat. Hand to mouth. Yes, it's really about, in the same way that you do this job and earning an income that allows you to buy the food, the farmer should be able to plant and really thinking about the income that would allow them to address those needs. And for me, there are many things that needs to be changed around that. And I think that access to credit is definitely one of those. What are the type of really innovative, adapted financial solutions that actually farmers need to access the different technologies and the different services that they need? Let me give a very simple example. We are working on post-harvest loss, and technology is really central to that. When you think about access to finance, what we think more about is first, how do you give loans for farmers to buy these equipments? I say, when I move from house to house, do I need to buy a truck, or do I need to access the services of a truck? How do we think about those technologies that farmers need, that they may have access to the use of that technology when they need it? Do not necessarily need to own it. And I think that that finance may be for other more long-term investment needs. So I think that the whole thing needs to be thought, need to be restructured to actually really more match the needs of the sector, of the actors.
With this idea for an Uber for tractors that has actually come up. And it's the small things that just change everything.
Absolutely.
Karina, I want to hear from you some maybe best practices. There's so many startups that, I don't want to go with the copy and paste, but there's ideas that could actually be borrowed that have worked in certain parts of the world that could maybe be applied here. Is this something that you're actually looking at, especially with the startups?
Sure, obviously. So, obviously there's many technologies in Israel, from fintech and to agriculture to water, but you can only bring technology. It needs to be modified and customized to the local market. So there are so many solutions, but again, we need to work on actually translating this technology that will actually fit the smallholder farmers' needs. And also, Mamadou talked about fintech solutions, so also crop protection and crop insurance, short-term loans, and so on and so forth. The list is so long. What we did actually in Startup Nation Central, that we established an innovation discovery platform. We mapped our entire ecosystem. It's free, it's online, everybody can reach and tap into local innovation. And the idea is, again, to create collaboration and to assist global players to tap into our local innovation. But our goal is to build bridges and to see how we can modify these technologies, to see what are the needs of smallholder farmers. It's well known in Israel that entrepreneurs are migrating from one sector to another. So there are so many technologies that actually were developed to different needs that we can bring over here and customize them, again, to local needs.
I'm afraid that's all the time that we did have, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks for making time. To my immediate left, Mr. Mamadou Biteye, who is the Managing Director, Africa Regional Office at the Rockefeller Foundation. Right next to him, that's of course on the left, is Karine Gategno, who is the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships at Startup Nation Central. On her left is Mr. Svein Tor, who is the President and CEO of Yara. And last but not least, on my extreme left is AGRA's, that's Alliance for a Green Revolution for Africa, Vice President, Country Support and Delivery. That's where we'll leave it for this edition of CNBC Africa's special panel discussion on agriculture. I'm Arnold Segawa. This is where we leave it. Good afternoon.